Hello everyone, welcome to Group 15. Our presentation today is about Apple's strategic response to US tariffs. Apple, the global tech giant, has long relied on China as its iPhone manufacturing hub, and around 80% of the 60 million iPhones sold annually in the US were assembled there. India, by contrast, served as a secondary hub. However, by 2026, Apple plans to shift both US-bound iPhone production to India. The trigger is rising US and China tensions, which include the renewed tariff under President Trump. This strategic shift comes with significant challenges. Manufacturing in India costs 5 to 8% more than in China, with total transition expenses reaching $40 billion. In addition, India's infrastructure constraints, such as logistic bottlenecks and traffic congestion, pose serious hurdles, resulting in low-efficient manufacturing and weak global competitiveness. The presentation will cover Apple's strategy and the pros and cons of it through the scale, scope, and speed length, and the GILR framework. Lastly, the presentation will explain how the strategy would contribute to SDG 8 and 9.
We can also evaluate Apple's movement of its US iPhone assembly from China to India using the scale, scope, and speed of entry framework. Scale of entry is the amount of resources committed to entering a foreign market. Apple has indicated that they plan to shift production of all iPhones sold in the United States from China to India as early as the end of 2026. To do this, Apple will have to shift the current 80% of the 60 million iPhones sold in the United States from China to India. This is an example of a large scale of entry as Apple moves significant resources from China to India to meet this target. The pros of a large scale of entry are that the movement from China to India is a strategic commitment to the US market in light of US and China market tensions, and further a strategic commitment to Indian markets. However, a con of a large scale of entry is the risk that if tensions between China and the US ease, as signaled by the Trump administration's willingness to negotiate, Apple's large scale of entry into India could cost the company and cause huge losses, as the Chinese assembly market is far more efficient and price competitive compared to their Indian counterparts. Scope of entry is the number of countries in which a firm enters or expands in a given period of time. In addition to China, Apple has a number of locations for assembly, including Vietnam and India, and are planning to widen their scope of entry and expand more in India. A pro is that Apple diversifies their risk by widening their scope of entry/expansion into India. This is clear as the 26% tariff imposed on India, which is currently suspended, is significantly less than the 145% US tariffs imposed on China. The cons to Apple's wider scope of entry/expansion is that Apple's assembly movement from China to India will dilute their expertise. This is because India's manufacturing and workforce ecosystem is less mature than China's. This means that Apple will have to carry out its assembly with a less efficient workforce.
Speed of entry is how rapidly a company can increase its international sales once the initial commitment has been made. In this case, Apple is already an international company, so focus shifts on how fast they will be able to expand. Apple has adopted a high speed of expansion as they plan to shift assembly of all iPhones sold in the United States from China to India as early as the end of 2026. A benefit of the high speed of entry framework is that given other technology firms such as Lenovo are also planning on expanding into the Indian market, Apple gains some aspects of a first mover advantage by adopting a high speed of expansion, as they gain more chances and first chances to establish partnerships. A con of a high speed of entry is that Apple faces coordination challenges with moving operations from China to India, as Chinese authorities have delayed shipments and blocked equipment without explanations. Apple's choice to expand with a high speed of entry makes them more than proportionately sensitive to delays, which could cost them more in the long run. Our first recommendation is for Apple to adopt a low speed of expansion. Due to the politically charged and unpredictable nature of the US-China tariffs, there's a possibility that tariffs could come down rapidly. We suggest that Apple adopt a low speed of entry to ensure that they don't rush to move their resources until they have a better understanding of the international landscape. Another reason to adopt a low speed of expansion is due to the potential of war in India, which could disrupt Apple's assembly of iPhones. A second recommendation is to address the less skilled/less efficient workforce. Apple could try to create some sort of training program to increase efficiency in India, which would have a positive economic ramification. There's been evidence of Apple trying to do this, as they've invested $50 million to provide supplier employees in India with leadership training and automation skills.
Apple's recent decision to shift a significant portion of its iPhone assembly from China to India can be effectively analyzed by using the Global Integration Local Responsiveness (GLLR) framework. This framework helps analyze international business strategy based on pressure, global integration, the need for consistency, coordination, and efficiency across markets, and the local responsiveness, the need to adapt to local conditions such as regulation, customer preference, and infrastructure. Apple historically adapted a global strategy with high global integration and low local responsiveness. This approach highlights centralized control, uniform product design, and cost efficiency. Apple relied heavily on the China-based manufacturing ecosystem, primarily through Foxconn, to mass-produce standardized iPhone for global distribution. This strategy helps Apple to maintain quality control, protect intellectual property, and save costs by using China's strong supply chain, skilled workers, and cost advantage. However, recent shifts in the global business environment has pushed Apple towards a transnational strategy, which requires both integration and high responsiveness. The tension between the United States and China, particularly under the hefty tariffs imposed by Trump, have made it risky to concentrate production in one geopolitical zone. Transnational companies are characterized by their ability to maximize local responsiveness and also gain benefits from global integration. By shifting US iPhone production from China to India, Apple has shown ability to adapt to changing local conditions. This is evident as Apple caters to US consumers who would otherwise have to pay the cost of tariffs imposed on Chinese assembled iPhones. One of the pros by shifting to the transnational strategy, Apple gives itself more flexibility to adapt to the local changes in different markets, such as regulations, labor policy, or other regional shifts. This allows Apple to make changes more quickly and efficiently and future changes in other regions. Over time, it makes Apple's overall operation more efficient and adaptable.
A downside of moving from a global to a transnational strategy is that it gives more independence to regions' operations and can make it harder to stay on the same page. While it improves local responsiveness, it also creates challenges in maintaining consistent standards, clear communication, and brand identity across markets. To ensure a successful shift from a global to a transnational strategy, Apple should implement a set of targeted actions. To mitigate the con that is decentralization, Apple should invest in a cross-country coordination system. This could help maintain a level of consistency and quality while ensuring Apple's local responsiveness elements too. Additionally, Apple should spread its manufacturing across different Indian states. This would lower the risk of relying too heavily on one region and improve the stability and flexibility of Apple's supply chain. In conclusion, Apple's shift from a global to a transnational strategy reflects a deeper effort to reconfigure where the value is created within the global technology industry. Using the GILR framework, we can see that Apple is trying to find a balance between global efficiency and local responsiveness.
The Sustainable Development Goals provide a unified agenda that addresses global challenges through integrated social, economical, and environmental progress. Apple's strategic shift to move assembly operations from China to India contributes to SDG 8 and SDG 9, reflecting its key aspects of the transnational business model balancing global efficiency with local responsiveness. SDG 8 contributes to decent work and economic growth by generating thousands of new employment opportunities, fostering workplace development, and attracting foreign direct investments in a rapidly growing economy. Apple's expansion into India includes a transfer of capital and financial resources from China to India, generating new economic growth and employment opportunities. In addition, with SDG 9, which includes industry innovation infrastructure, Apple's investment in India's manufacturing capabilities enhances the country's industrial base and encourages innovation through technology transfer, training, and industrial production standards. This is shown by Apple's initiation of the Apple Supply Employment Development Fund. The company has invested $50 million to provide supplier employees in India with leadership training and automation skills, aiming to enhance technical expertise. By viewing this shift in the international business framework lens, we see that Apple adjusts to its global strategy in a way that fosters economic sustainability, resilience, and growth. This highlights how Apple uses diverse production to mitigate risks from the current trade tensions between the US and China.